When I was 17 and trying to buy my first car, I was checking Craigslist every single day. I was not looking for anything nice or impressive, just something cheap that could take me from point A to point B. My maximum budget was $3,000. So every car I looked at was from around 2003 or 2004 at the newest. One day, I came across a listing for a 2002 two-door Honda Accord. It was priced at $2,000, and the mileage was under 80,000, so I immediately wanted to see it. The person who posted the ad lived a few towns away, about a 20-minute drive on the highway. After messaging back and forth with him, I convinced my mom to drive me out there to look at the car. At first, I texted him asking for more information, but he ended up calling me instead. He sounded mostly normal on the phone and was actually pretty polite. He answered my questions about the car and other details, and when he asked for my name, and I told him Dan, he responded by saying, "Dan, that is a great name." Then he added that it was his name too. I laughed just to be polite, but something about it felt strange. The way he said it almost sounded like he forgot his own name for a moment, because there was an odd pause before he said it was his name as well. It felt a little off, but the rest of the call seemed fine. The next day, my mom drove me to the address he gave us. As soon as we got off the highway and onto the local streets, we both noticed how rough the neighborhood looked. There were bars on windows and graffiti under bridges. I hoped his place would be different, but when we arrived, it was not. The property did not look like the others around it. The entrance was between two houses, not a real driveway, just a narrow road leading into a small area with two more houses. Everything was tightly packed together. But parked there was the Honda Accord, sitting in what I guess counted as the driveway. My mom and I walked up to the front door and rang the bell. We could not tell if it rang, so I knocked instead. Suddenly, a window opened, and a man's voice told us to come inside and said the door was unlocked. I reached for the door, but my mom stopped me and quietly asked if I was sure about going in. I said yes, and we went inside, expecting to meet Dan. The inside of the house was dim, with very little natural light. I called out hello. A voice replied, "Over here." It sounded deeper than the voice I heard on the phone. I asked if he was Dan, and he said yes. I started walking through the small kitchen toward where the voice was coming from. My mom grabbed my shoulder and stopped me, whispering that we were leaving. The man's voice came from behind a door at the end of the kitchen. He called out and said we could do the transaction down there. My mom and I quickly left the house. As we hurried back toward the car, a woman from the next building came rushing over, telling us not to go inside. She asked why we were there, and we explained that we were trying to buy a car and that the man was calling us into his basement. She told us she had been worried about the man next door for months, that she believed he was up to something bad, and that random cars were always showing up at his place late at night. We asked if his name was Dan. She said she was not sure, but remembered him introducing himself as Mike. She told us to get as far away from the house as possible, and we did. It still makes me uneasy to think that my mom and I could have been killed in that basement if we went down there. It makes no sense to do a transaction before even seeing the car or agreeing on anything. And why the basement at all? The entire situation felt like a setup. I do not know what he intended to do, especially to me, if we had gone down there. This actually happened to my best friend Chris. His family had recently bought a new television, and they were considering just throwing the old one away. Chris's older brother John suggested to their dad, Rick, that they could sell the old TV on Craigslist and make some quick money. Since no one in the family had ever used Craigslist before, John offered to handle the ad himself, since his girlfriend had used the site in the past. John posted a picture of the television with the description reading used 55-inch Samsung 4K TV for $200. He included Rick's phone number so anyone interested could call or text him directly. About a week later, Rick received a call from a man who introduced himself as Toby. He said he wanted to buy the TV and asked if he could come by the house at 10:00 that same night to pick it up. Rick agreed and gave Toby the home address. Later that evening, Rick, Chris, and John waited outside so they could help load the TV when Toby arrived. Instead, Rick got another call from Toby saying he could not make it to the house because he was almost out of gas. They agreed to meet instead at a Circle K parking lot. After the call ended, the three of them loaded the TV into the back of Rick's pickup truck and drove to the Circle K, which was about 15 miles from their house. When they arrived, they parked near the gas pumps, where Toby was filling up a black Nissan Altima. A few minutes later, a tall, heavy-set bald man with a goatee walked over to the truck and said he was Toby. He told Rick that the TV was too large to fit in his car and suggested they follow him back to his house instead. Rick agreed. After driving for several minutes on the main highway, they turned onto a back road that immediately felt sketchy. Trees lined both sides of the road, and it was full of potholes. Toby texted Rick saying his house was at the end of the road. When they reached it, the place did not look like a house at all. It looked more like a tall, abandoned building. After getting out of the truck, Toby told them to untie the TV so they could unload it. As soon as they finished untying it and turned around, they saw three large men step out from behind the car. All of them pulled out guns, including Toby. They threatened to kill them if they did not hand over everything they had. Rick, Chris, and John did not hesitate. They gave up their wallets and phones, and the men also took the TV. After taking everything, the group got back into the car and drove off. When they made it home, Chris and John told their mom everything that happened. Rick called the police and reported the incident, even giving them the license plate number since he had memorized it. To this day, Chris's family never heard about any arrests. That was the first and last time they ever used Craigslist. Back in 2012, when Craigslist was at the height of its popularity, my house was broken into and robbed. A lot of my belongings were taken, including 2 televisions, my Xbox 360, all of my video games, my hockey skates, and any loose cash I had around. I called the police and had them come look through the house, but they found nothing useful, no fingerprints or anything that could help identify who did it. I gave them a full list of everything that was stolen, but the police in my county were useless and did nothing to help. Now I was stuck having to replace everything myself. Surprisingly, the most expensive thing to replace would have been my video game collection, but I decided to start by replacing the TVs. I went back onto Craigslist and saw a listing posted earlier that same day for a 40-inch Panasonic TV at a really low price. Panasonic was the same brand I had owned, so I contacted the seller and drove to his house that night. He let me inside, and the place was absolutely filthy. The smell was awful, and the stained carpets and overall mess made it even worse. He led me into a back room where the TV was set up. I looked it over and immediately realized it was the exact same TV that had been stolen from my living room. I started scanning the room more closely and noticed a smaller television shoved into the corner, along with an Xbox. The smaller TV looked exactly like my other stolen one. I picked up the Xbox and flipped it over, checking for a long scratch on the casing that mine had. It was there. That was my Xbox. That was all my stuff. I looked at the man and told him he was the piece of trash who robbed me. He looked confused for a moment. Then his expression changed. He suddenly acted angry and told me to get out of his house. As he said it, he lifted his shirt and showed a gun holster. I live in Texas, so he likely had a legal permit. I left immediately and called the police. When they arrived, the man refused to let them inside. He demanded a warrant and claimed I was harassing him. I explained everything to the officers, including my earlier police report about the robbery. They told me they would not be able to get a search warrant until the following day. I regretted not taking photos while I was inside, but at the time, I was too angry to think clearly. That night, while getting ready for bed and researching search warrants, lawyers, and what might happen next, I suddenly heard a window shatter downstairs. I instantly knew it was him. Trusting my instincts, I climbed out my bedroom window onto a small ledge, then dropped down to the ground and ran straight to my neighbor's house. My neighbor let me inside while I called the police. They arrived within 10 minutes. I gave them the spare key I kept hidden outside, and they entered my house with their guns drawn. Inside, they found him hiding under my bed. If that is not horrifying, I do not know what is. Earlier I said the cops in my area usually suck, but this was the one time I was grateful for them. It was the same man from the Craigslist ad. He had broken into my house that night, intending to kill me. He had a gun on him, and there is no innocent reason to be hiding under someone's bed. That thought still unsettles me. He was convicted of breaking and entering with intent to commit murder beyond a reasonable doubt and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Even so, I moved to a different town and changed my phone number. I did everything I could to erase any trail that might lead him back to me when he eventually gets out, which I am sure he already has for good behavior. That part scares me the most. All of this happened over less than $1,000 worth of stuff. It honestly makes me sick. To this day, I believe Craigslist is one of the most dangerous places on the internet. I once replied to a Craigslist listing in the free section for a mini fridge. I was putting together what people like to call a man cave in my basement, and I needed a small fridge to slide under the bar for beer and drinks. I checked the address on maps, and the house was listed as waterfront, sitting on top of a tall cliff overlooking a massive lake. The person texting me said his name was John. He explained that he would not be home, only his elderly mother. He told me that when I arrived, I should let myself inside and head to the bedroom all the way to the right from the foyer, since his mom was hard of hearing and moved very slowly. I remember thinking for a moment how dangerous that sounded. If someone with bad intentions showed up instead of me, they could easily take advantage of an old woman living alone. Still, I set up a time with John to go to his mother's house. I arrived around sunset, and honestly, pulling up the long dirt path and seeing the large house perched at the top of the hill with the sun dropping behind the lake was stunning. Before going inside, I stood there for a couple minutes just admiring the view below. I texted John to let him know I had arrived. He repeated his instructions, telling me again to just walk in and go to the room on the far right, since his mother would be waiting there. He reminded me that she was very old and that I would need to do all the lifting myself. I told him that was fine. I walked in through the front door, which was already partially open. The first thing I noticed was the smell of cotton. It reminded me of my grandmother's house. I followed his directions and went to the door on the far right, which led into a narrow hallway. From the first impression, the house felt pretty large. As I walked down the hallway, the cotton smell suddenly turned into something awful. It smelled like death, like a rotting animal. When I reached the room at the end of the hall and stepped inside, the smell became overwhelming. That was when I saw the body. There was a dead, decomposing older woman lying on the bed. It looked like she had been dead for at least a week or two. I felt like I was going to vomit. Then I heard loud, unhinged laughter coming from upstairs, along with heavy stomping. It sounded like someone was directly above me, slamming their feet on the floor on purpose to scare me, and it worked. I ran out of the house straight to my car. Before driving away, I looked back and saw a man standing at one of the upstairs windows. Then I noticed another person at a downstairs window. Both of them were wearing face masks, the same kind people wear now for illnesses. At that moment, my phone started blowing up with text messages, all in capital letters. The first one said, "Ha ha ha," followed by "We see you," and "Look at the windows," along with a bunch of emojis. The final message said, "Come back inside, you forgot your fridge." I sped off the property and called the police while driving home, reporting the dead body in the house. After officers investigated the property and removed the body, which they said showed no signs of stabbing or gunshot wounds, police later came to my house to question me. I showed them the entire text conversation and gave them the phone number, warning them it was probably fake. I was right, but one officer named Boris told me they could still trace it even if it came from a fake number app. About a week later, I called the police station to ask about the case. The woman who answered either did not know anything or did not care enough to check. She was rude and unhelpful. I never saw or read anything in the news about arrests being made, and to this day, I do not know if the people in that house were ever caught or if they were responsible for that woman's death.